Hi, my name is Stefan Santosson, and welcome to this presentation about signature validation tokens, a solution for how to make long-term signature validation easy. The purpose of this presentation is to raise awareness about signature validation tokens, to find contributors and reviewers of specifications, and in the end to establish a good and global standard. The history of the signature validation token is that it started off as a Swedish government-funded research project for the archivable electronic signatures and has been adopted by the Swedish Agency for Digital Government as part of its technical framework for Swedish electronic ID and e-signing. It has been developed as open source, free to use. It has no known IPR, and it has been put forth to the IETF for standardization. A first number of drafts has been created, and it has been implemented in the EduSign signing solution. It's a signing solution for the Swedish school system, where you can sign documents, where the signature validation token is an important part for making it possible to archive and future validate electronic signed documents. So the nature of the electronic signed document is that it binds the signature to a signer and the signed document to the signature. And this is what we call the advanced electronic signature as specified by the EIDAS regulation in Europe. It's extremely important today in e-government, where we have millions and millions of these signed documents that needs to be archived and revalidated possibly in the future. And it's worth noticing that a signature is valid forever. Once signed, you cannot unsign or regret signing something. But the proof of a signature may not be processable, validatable forever, because some of the proofs expire. And that's the challenge here. So the major picture is that a person signing a document, the relying party relying on it and accepting it as a proof of an agreement at a certain point of time, and this goes into archive. In the future, there is a dispute where you bring this document out, and it's important then that the conclusion about the validity of the signature matches what the relying party was facing when accepting the signed document. And if this works, it affects how much we need to put into investment to create an archival system. Because if we have signatures that can be revalidated, archival is a lot cheaper and less complex than if the archival system needs to protect over time, over a very long time, the integrity and the signature status of a document. So the nature of electronic signature validation is that this in the end depends on an electronic ID of the user, what we call the certificate. And that brings the identity of the signer together with the signer's public key. The idea is that there is a secret key that only belongs to the signer, and if the public key can be used to match the signature, then this is the signer. And the validation process then uses that certificate to verify the signature, which verifies data about the signed document and then the signed document itself and binds it to the signature. And thereby we can check that the signature matches the signed document and determine who is the signer. The problem here is that certificate validation is hard to maintain over time, and it's pretty complex because the certificate is also signed and it needs to be verified by the issuer of the certificate. And the issuer's key is also provided by certificate, and that's create a certificate chain up to a key that we have directly trusted in our application or environment, and that is called the trust anchor. But certificates expire. At a certain date, we do no longer publish revocation information because they can get revoked, and then you need to be able to look up if this certificate is revoked or not. And that is done through getting a CRL, a certificate revocation list, or an online information from the online certificate status protocol. A OCSP response is then signed by an OCSP issuer or an OCSP responder, which also has a cert. So this creates a whole pile of external evidence in order to support that this certificate is valid. And over time, this gets harder and harder to maintain because keys may be lost or stolen, and algorithms may grow old and insecure. So, in order to do this, we need active support from trusted third parties. So we can't just take a signature and validate it by its own. We need support from external services who can vouch to us or vouch for the accuracy and security of elements. So we used to have two trusted third parties at our disposal, and that's the certification authority and the timestamping authority. The certification authority has the purpose of issuing certificates and to issue proof of validity in the form of CRLs and OCSP. And the timestamping authority has the purpose of proving that a certain amount of data existed at a particular time. Now we have a third choice in trusted third party that can be used for signature validation, and that's actually introduced by the EIDAS regulation and written into the EIDAS regulation in EIDAS Implementation Act 2015-1506. It states that member states shall recognize electronic signatures basically if they are supported by a validation authority by the country where the signature was created. So this means that a signature is considered valid if a statement by a trusted validation authority claims that it is valid. That's one completely valid way to assert that the signature is valid. And that we can use to make things simpler. So we have an existing standard today that we can use, ETSI TS, and that making use of these elements of trust that we get from the certification authority and the timestamping authority. So this provides certificates, CRLs, OCSPs, and timestamps that we can bundle with the signature to validate it in the future. What we're making in the signature validation token approach is we're making use of the trusted validation authority and the fact that we can rely on a validation authority to make a statement of the validity of the signature to create a simpler solution. So we measure the success here by simplicity, predictability, and security. Simplicity because it's important to maintain this over time, and this requires interoperability. And it requires interoperability not only between parties, but between the same implementation over time, so that if I process a signature today and process the same signature 15 years from now, I come to the same conclusion. And this is important for predictability, because it's essential that if we come to a conclusion about the signature today, we want to be able to reproduce that conclusion tomorrow in order to, in a dispute resolution, bring forth that at the time when reliance on this was made, this was actually considered a valid signature, and that was what was the state of the art at the time. And of course we need security for us to be able to rely on this information. So the timeline we have here is that it starts when the certificate is issued and it ends in a dispute resolution in the future. Between that time we have a document signed using that signature, and at the end there is a certificate expiry of that certificate. So between the expiry and the certificate, the document signing, we can collect information about the validity of that certificate. But if the certificate is revoked, the time frame is shortened. So the time between document signing and certificate revocation is where we can collect information about the validity of the certificate and store that for the future use. And a good time to do that is when we validate the signature, the time of the signature validation. This is then used in the ETSI TS standards to put this information into the signed document. and this is brought forth to the future. In the dispute resolution, we can use that information to recreate even after the certificate has expired. This, of course, creates a lot of complexity because I don't just have this certificate that needs support up to a trust anchor revocation information. If I have a timestamp that proves whether the signature was created, this also needs support from this external evidence. And then in the future, when the certificate has expired and keys may no longer be trusted or algorithms are no longer trusted, we need to have archive timestamps, and they also require supporting evidence. In fact, every piece of signed evidence here may have the same problem and needs support from future archive timestamps. And archive timestamping makes it possible to validate something even if the algorithm is old, because we know that before that timestamp was made, this algorithm was actually considered secure. So we still have problems, or a challenge at least, with predictability in this setup, because we may change our minds about trust anchors in the future, or forget about trust anchors, or have another opinion whether trust anchors are valid or not and trusted. Algorithms may grow old, and it might be a problem to determine exactly when an algorithm could be trusted or not. We have authorization issues here where revocation information may just simply be asserted by a party, where we have problems determining if that party is authorized to provide that information in the future. There might be a problem of completeness of supporting information, of revocation information, to prove its validity in the future. And this creates an uncertainty and a possibility that we may come to another conclusion in the future. At least this is a challenging subject. So the claim here is that we can make something more predictable and easier if we can reduce the number of supporting evidence we need to support the signature. And in fact, we can reduce it to one piece of evidence, and that is the signature validation token. The signature validation token then contains all information we need. So in order to prove the validity of the document, and so it has a function both of authenticating the whole document and all elements of the signature, like the signed attributes, the signature value, and the certificate, and also has documented a validation process that was made and the result of that validation process according to a defined policy, and also lists evidence of time that has been examined by the validation service. So we have the times when the signature known to existed, we know the validity of the certificates, and we can check the integrity of the signed elements, the signature elements, and the signed document itself. That makes it possible to use whatever parts of this we want for a future validation. We can still validate the signature. It's not that we can't do that. We have all the information to check the signature using the algorithm which was used to create the signature, and we can rely on just the certificate status in order to do that. We can also take the full value of this and rely on the validation process actually provided by this validation service. And the relying party can choose who is to be issuing this validation token, so that it is a trusted party that all will trust in the future dispute resolution. So we can bring the validation information and conclusion into the future through the signature validation token, which is very important here because that actually guarantees the predictability of the result. We know the result of the signature validation token outcome because we could see it when we did the validation, and when we issued the SVT, we know what result it will bring to the future. We can even combine these, so we can take an ETSI signature, we can validate that in the future by the validation service, and then issue the SVT and bring that to a future dispute resolution where the ETSI signature can't bring this any further. So how did we do? We create something that is a lot simpler. We have shown that in our open source as well. This is very, very simple compared to the complex validation of all elements and archive timestamps. It's also a lot less information dense. So the token is so much smaller than gathering all the cascading evidence. It provides predictability, and security can be arbitrarily chosen here, both in terms of algorithms and in terms of what trusted party you trust in order to validate the signature and vouch for its validity in the future. Another important standard in the area is the ETSI signature validation report. So that's a standard that provides a result from a signature validation process. Why can't that be used as a signature validation token? Well, it has not been designed for that, at least not yet. So the meaning of using this is that I validate the signature today and I get the validation report as a statement of the current status of that signature. If I go into the future, I send the document again and get a new validation report. And that's how it's designed to work. A SVT is different. It's you send a request to the validation service and you get back a document enriched with a signature validation token, which is put inside the document and inside the document signature. And in the future, you don't do a revalidation, you just verify the signature validation token, and by using that you can verify the document. And the challenge that we do not have here, which we have on this side, is that there might be a difference in the results because you're doing a new validation. So how can you be sure that these results match? But you can combine these techniques. You can use a validation service that creates a signature validation report according to the ETSI standard, and you can use that as a basis for issuing an SVT and enrich that into the document. You can even put that validation report as an extension to the SVT, and you can bring that validation report into the future and assert that's what was valid about that signature when it was originally validated. So you can use this to enhance the functionality of the ETSI signature validation report in a very easy manner. So we have profiles for this. There is one profile for PDF signing and one profile for XML signing. The signature validation token in PDF is put in a document timestamp in the end, and we choose to do that because the signatures in PDF stack, and the new signature locks the old signature, and you can't change that anymore because that will break the later signature. So we can't add post signing, we can't add the SVT into the signature. So we add it in the end, and there's one SVT that asserts the validity of all the signature. In XML, we have individual signatures and we can extend them at any time. Therefore, we made the simple solution to have one SVT per signature in an object in the XML signature. We have plans to do a profile for JWS, the JSON web signature, what would be put into the header. But that remains to be done. It's a simple format based on a JOT, a JSON Web Token. It's an IETF standard, which provides all the capabilities of signing and encrypting things in JSON tokens. So we use that to sign the signature validation token data. And it creates something that is fairly compact. Here's an example of an SVT and an XML signature put into an object of the XML signature. This is way more compact and space efficient than storing cascading evidence in form of CRLs, timestamps, and everything you would have. So this is a very, very compact form for doing archival and very space efficient and also easy to use and implement. We have resources, current drafts, but we have a GitHub page where we have links to everything actually, which is, so if you get to this GitHub page, Sweden Connect IETF SVT, we have links to everything else even there, even to this presentation. There is an IETF mailing list, the SVT at ietf.org, where we can have discussions about the the development of these profiles. And there is an open source library, free to use, for dealing with SVT and the profiles for XML and PDF. And we have a test service here, the sandbox Sweden Connect.se Sigval, where you can test this. You can upload any document, can validate to a trusted list in Europe, and get the validation result. Here it will show the end of time when this service is capable of validating that signature, but you can also extend that signature with the signature validation token. If you push this button here and you get a new document, and you can validate the upgraded document and validate it based on the signature validation token. And now we have no limit anymore about the time when this document can be validated. If you look at this in a PDF reader, if it's a PDF signed document, you will see it shows up as a document timestamp. It's issued by the Signature Validation Authority here. So, how to get involved? Subscribe to the IETF mailing list, svt@ietf.org. Read the specifications, test the implementation, provide feedback, engage with us, and help us write an awesome standard and to make this happen. Thank you very much for listening.